Cadet Mira Hayes adjusted her uniform for the third time as she waited outside the lecture hall. The Galactic Xenobiology Academy on Helios was everything the brochures had promised. Cutting-edge facilities, diverse species representation, and an atmosphere of scholarly dedication to understanding the universe's most extreme organisms. As the only human in the exchange program, she couldn't help but feel both pride and apprehension. "First aid jitters?" a melodic voice asked beside her. Mira turned to see a Kethlari student, their translucent skin cycling through gentle blue hues. She recognized the pattern as a friendly greeting. "Is it that obvious?" Mira smiled, extending her hand before remembering Kethlari preferred non-contact greetings. She awkwardly converted the gesture into a small wave. "I'm Leary, your roommate assignment," the Kethlari said, skin flashing briefly with yellow amusement at Mira's cultural fumble. "You're the Terran exchange student, yes? We don't see many of your kind here." "Or anywhere in galactic academia," Mira acknowledged. "I'm Mira Hayes, first human to be accepted into the xenobiology program." Fascinating. Leary's skin shifted to a curious green. "I've read that Terra, Earth, is technically classified as a Class 4 environmental hardship world, but the Council granted exceptions for your species due to your technological achievements." Mira maintained her diplomatic smile. The classification was a polite euphemism. Earth was a death world by galactic standards. Its gravity, temperature extremes, atmospheric composition, and predatory ecosystems made it a nightmare for most sapient species. Humans were quarantined to their solar system for centuries before finally convincing the Galactic Council they weren't a danger to the greater community. "We're adaptable," Mira said simply. The doors to the lecture hall slid open, saving her from further explanation. Inside, the chamber was arranged in concentric semicircles, with a massive hollow table dominating the center. Students of various species filed in, the bulky, four-armed Varans with their protective exoskeletons, the willowy Zephyrians who seemed to float rather than walk, several Gandorian twins moving in perfect synchronicity, and dozens of other species Mira had only seen in textbooks. She took a seat beside Leary, noting how everyone gave her slightly more space than necessary. Whether from curiosity or caution, she couldn't tell. The lights dimmed, and the hollow table illuminated as a distinguished Illuvian glided to the center of the room. His scales shimmered with the iridescent patterns denoting academic achievement. "Welcome to Advanced Xenobiology 505, Extremophile Sentient Adaptations," the professor announced. "I am Professor Arlo Vence. This course explores evolutionary responses to extreme environmental pressures, particularly those that would be lethal to most galactic standard organisms." The hollow table came alive with a three-dimensional star chart, zooming in on a sector far from any Galactic Council outposts. "We begin today with a particular fascination of mine, the Zarathra of Krell Prime." The hologram shifted, displaying a creature that sent murmurs through the classroom. It stood nearly 3 meters tall on 4 powerful limbs, with a segmented body covered in chitinous plates that gleamed like polished obsidian. Multiple sensory appendages protruded from what appeared to be its head, surrounding 3 separate jaw structures, each filled with razor-sharp, serrated teeth. Mira felt her heart rate accelerate involuntarily. Something about the creature triggered an instinctive response, a predator recognizing another apex hunter. The Zarathra evolved on a world with twice standard gravity, atmospheric pressure exceeding 3.6 times galactic norm, and surface temperatures averaging 48 degrees Celsius. Professor Venn continued. "But most remarkable is the planet's chemical composition. The atmosphere contains significant concentrations of sulfuric compounds, and precipitation is highly acidic. The hologram zoomed in on the creature's exoskeleton. Note the remarkable adaptation in the Zarathra's outer plates. They contain complex molecular structures that neutralize acid on contact, rendering them effectively acid-proof. Their metabolic processes have evolved to filter toxins that would be immediately fatal to most organisms, including many in this room. Mira felt a strange, tingling sensation as her body's fight-or-flight response activated. Her adrenal glands released a small surge of hormones, causing her heart rate to spike again. The environmental sensors in the room registered the change, and several students turned to look at her with alarm. A Varan student 2 rows down made a gesture of protection, their exoskeleton plates clicking audibly. "There's a bioresponse in Sector 3, announced the room's automated system. "Possible stress reaction detected." Mira forced herself to breathe evenly. "I'm fine," she said, embarrassed by the attention. Just fascinated by the specimen. Professor Venz paused, his compound eyes studying her with scientific interest. "Cadet Hayes, our first Terran student. Your physiological response is intriguing. Perhaps a natural reaction to recognizing an apex predator?" "Something like that," Mira replied carefully. "On Earth, we have evolutionary programming that responds to certain predatory features." "Fascinating," Professor Venn said, genuinely interested rather than alarmed. "The Zarathra represents one of the most successful evolutionary paths for extreme environment adaptation. They possess incredible strength, capable of exerting forces up to 40 times their body weight. Their sensory organs can detect molecular changes in their environment, down to parts per billion, and their neural responses are among the fastest recorded in any organic life form." Mira listened intently, increasingly aware that many of these extraordinary adaptations were, to varying degrees, present in humans as well. Earth's gravity, atmospheric composition, and volatile environment had forged humanity into something the galaxy found both fascinating and frightening. It was why humans had been quarantined for so long, labeled as Deathworld monsters themselves. "Professor," Mira found herself speaking before fully considering the consequences. "Has anyone studied the Zarathra's endurance capabilities? The hologram suggests significant muscle density that would support prolonged activity even under environmental stress." The lecture hall went quiet. The question was technically academic, but the insight behind it suggested knowledge only a similar species might possess. Professor Venz tilted his head with interest. "An excellent observation. Cadet Hayes. Indeed. The Zarathra exhibit remarkable stamina. They've been observed pursuing prey for what would equate to 14 standard galactic hours without rest, maintaining speeds that would exhaust most predatory species." A Gandorian student whispered to their twin, loud enough for many to hear. "Like Terrans during their marathon rituals." Mira pretended not to hear, but noticed Leary's skin shifting to a curious purple hue. "For our next class," Professor Venz continued, "we'll examine the Zarathra's hunting techniques through simulation. I encourage all of you to review the preliminary data on your personal terminals. Class dismissed." As students began filing out, Leary remained beside Mira. "That was interesting," the Kethlari said, skin now pulsing with questioning patterns. "You seem to know a lot about apex predator physiology for someone who just started the course." Mira gathered her materials. "I did some preliminary reading. Wanted to make a good impression." "Of course," Leary replied, not entirely convinced. "We're scheduled for the same lab session tomorrow. Would you like to prepare together?" Mira hesitated. Making friends was part of her mission here, proving humans could integrate into galactic society. But close scrutiny might reveal more than she wanted. "Sure," she said finally. "My quarters at 1900 hours?" Perfect. Leary's skin flashed with genuine pleasure. I'll bring nutrient supplements. I understand Terrans require regular caloric intake. Mira smiled. We call it snacking. And yes, we do it quite often. Walking back to her quarters, Mira passed a group of administrative officers. One of them, a stern-looking Iridian with characteristic bureaucratic insignia, watched her pass with undisguised suspicion. "Cadet Hayes," he called out, his voice measured and formal. "A moment of your time." Mira stopped, maintaining a respectful posture. "Yes, Administrator." "Thane Zor, Head of Administrative Operations," he replied stiffly. "I trust your first day was educational." "Very much so, Administrator Zor. The Academy's facilities are impressive." Zor nodded curtly. "The Academy has made considerable accommodations for your unique physiological requirements. The Council's decision to include Terrans in our exchange programs remains controversial in some circles." Mira kept her expression neutral despite the barely veiled hostility. "I understand the concerns, Administrator. That's precisely why I'm here. To demonstrate that humans can contribute positively to galactic scientific advancement." "Indeed," Zor replied, clearly unconvinced. "Just remember, Cadet, that you are here on provisional status. Any incidents or concerning behaviors will be immediately reported to the Council's Deathworld Containment Committee." The bureaucrat's use of the term Deathworld wasn't accidental. It was a reminder of Earth's classification and humanity's tenuous position in galactic society. "I understand completely," Mira said evenly. "If there's nothing else, I have preparation for tomorrow's lab." Zor stepped aside. "Remember, Cadet, you are being watched." In her quarters, Mira finally allowed herself to relax. The room had been modified for human comfort. Slightly higher gravity settings, temperature controls adjusted for Terran preference, and a small food replication unit programmed with Earth cuisine. She retrieved her personal communication device, secured against monitoring, and activated it. "Day 1 report," she spoke softly. "Integration proceeding as expected. Some curiosity, some suspicion. Nothing beyond projected parameters. Administrative resistance present, but within acceptable range. Scientific observations initiated regarding galactic perception of human physiological capabilities." She paused, considering how to phrase the next part. "Subject matter of initial lecture, Zarathra. Apex, predators from extreme environment. Striking similarities to Terran evolutionary path noted. Potential opportunity to gather comparative data while maintaining cover as merely interested student. Will continue observation." Mira deactivated the device and tucked it into a hidden compartment in her luggage. She wasn't just here to learn about alien biology. She was here to gather information on how the galaxy viewed humans, information that would help Earth negotiate better terms with the Galactic Council and perhaps, eventually, end their effective quarantine. She prepared a cup of coffee from the replication unit, noting with amusement that the cup was made from acid-resistant material, standard for all containers on campus, but ironically, perfect for the caustic Terran beverage. Sipping the hot liquid, Mira reviewed the data on Zarathra, making detailed notes on the parallels to human physiology. Tomorrow's lab would be challenging. She would need to demonstrate enough knowledge to succeed academically without revealing just how much she innately understood about surviving on a death world. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Leary, carrying what appeared to be study materials and a container of luminescent food cubes. "I hope I'm not too early," the Kethlari said, skin cycling through apologetic colors. "Not at all," Mira smiled, gesturing to the small common area. "Come in." Leary settled onto a cushion, arranging the materials on the low table. I brought some standard nutrient supplements and some Kethlari specialty items. I wasn't sure about your dietary preferences." "That's thoughtful. Thank you," Mira said, offering her coffee cup. "Would you like to try an earth beverage? This is coffee, a stimulant drink." Leary's skin flashed with hesitant curiosity. "Is it safe for non-Terran consumption?" Mira laughed. "In small quantities. Yes, it's bitter, but many species find the stimulant effect pleasant." Leary cautiously accepted the cup, taking a minimal sip. Immediately, their skin rippled with surprised orange waves. "It's intense! How much of this do Terrans typically consume?" "Some of us drink several cups daily," Mira admitted, enjoying the Kethlari's reaction. "Our nervous systems are adapted to process various toxins and stimulants." "Remarkable." Leary handed back the cup, skin settling into an intrigued pattern. "The preliminary data mentions that the Zarathra can consume substances toxic to most species. They process the compounds and convert them into useful biochemical energy." Mira nodded, carefully navigating the parallel. "Many species develop unusual metabolic adaptations based on their environmental pressures. On Earth, we have organisms that can survive radiation, extreme heat, even vacuum exposure for brief periods. Your interest in xenobiology must stem from your planet's biodiversity," Leary observed, spreading out the study materials. "Partly," Mira acknowledged, "but also because understanding how life adapts to extreme conditions helps us understand our place in the galactic community." They spent the next few hours reviewing the Zarathra data, preparing for the simulation lab. Mira was careful to ask questions that a curious student might pose, rather than displaying the innate understanding she possessed of Deathworld survival strategies. As Leary prepared to leave, they paused at the door. "You know, there are rumors among the students." Mira maintained a neutral expression. "What kind of rumors?" "That the Academy accepted a Terran student as part of a classified research initiative. Some suggest they want to study you as much as teach you." Mira had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill through her. "And what do you think, Leary?" The Kethlari's skin cycled through thoughtful patterns. "I think knowledge comes from unexpected sources, and I think you may surprise everyone." With that cryptic response, Leary departed, alone again. Mira considered the implications. Being under observation complicated her mission, but didn't change it. She would continue as planned, learn, observe, and prove that humans deserved a place in galactic society beyond their quarantined status. The next morning, the simulation laboratory was bustling with activity when Mira arrived. The central area had been transformed into a recreation of Krell Prime's terrain, jagged obsidian formations, pools of bubbling acidic fluid, and an atmosphere visibly heavy with yellowish vapor. "Impressive, isn't it?" Professor Venn said, approaching as Mira examined the simulation. "Our environmental generators can recreate almost any planetary condition within safety parameters." "It's remarkably detailed," Mira replied. "Are those actual acidic compounds?" "Diluted versions, yes. The simulation balances realism with safety. Today's exercise will test your understanding of Zarathra hunting behaviors in their native environment." Students were dividing into research teams, each assigned different observation tasks. Mira found herself grouped with Leary and a bulky Voron named Sisik, whose protective exoskeleton clicked nervously as they approached the simulation boundary. "I don't see why we need to experience these conditions firsthand," Sisik grumbled. "Theoretical study would be sufficient." "Immersive learning enhances retention by 64%, Leary replied matter-of-factly. "Besides, the safety protocols won't allow any permanent damage." "That's not entirely reassuring," the Voron muttered. Professor Venz addressed the class from a control platform. Today's simulation will demonstrate Zarathra hunting patterns. The creature's holographic representation will interact with the environment as it would in the wild. Your task is to document its behaviors, predict its movements, and identify strategies that potential prey might employ to evade it. The professor activated the system, and a life-sized holographic Zarathra materialized in the simulation zone, even knowing it wasn't real. Mira felt her heart rate increase and her muscles tense, instinctive responses to a recognized threat. Remember, Professor Venn continued, the simulation includes sensory feedback. You will feel approximations of the environmental conditions, including the increased gravity and atmospheric pressure. If at any point the experience becomes overwhelming, simply step back across the boundary line. The teams entered the simulation zone. Immediately, Mira felt the increased gravitational pull and the thicker atmosphere pressing against her. While uncomfortable, it wasn't debilitating. Her Earth-adapted physiology could handle far worse conditions. She noticed, however, that both Leary and Sisik were struggling more obviously. The Kethlari's movements became more deliberate, their skin darkening with effort, while the Voran's exoskeleton appeared to weigh more heavily on their frame. "Are you both all right?" Mira asked, consciously slowing her own movements to match their pace. "Manageable," Leary replied, though their skin betrayed discomfort. "The gravity is intense." "Just stay close to the boundary," Mira suggested. "We can observe from here initially." The holographic Zarathra began a hunting sequence, stalking through the rocky terrain with surprising speed for its size. Its movements were fluid and purposeful, sensory appendages constantly sampling the air. "Note how it uses environmental features for concealment," Mira observed, recording data on her tablet. "Despite its size, it's using that vapor cloud as cover." "Remarkable sensory adaptation," Leary added, studying the creature's head structure. "It appears to be using chemoreception primarily, rather than visual tracking." Sisik pointed to a formation nearby. "We should move to that elevated position for a better observation angle." They carefully navigated the treacherous terrain toward the rocky outcropping. The simulated acidic pools bubbled menacingly, occasionally releasing vapor that stung Mira's eyes and skin, a diluted version of what would be present on Krell Prime, but still uncomfortable. As they reached the formation, the holographic Zarathra suddenly changed direction, moving with alarming speed toward their position. "It's just part of the program," Leary reassured, though their skin had paled considerably. "The hologram can't actually harm us." "The environmental effects are real enough," Sisik countered, exoskeleton plates shifting defensively. "And that thing is moving right toward the acid pool below us." Mira watched the creature's approach with growing concern. Its movements were too deliberate, too focused on their position. Something wasn't right with the simulation parameters. "We should move back toward the boundary," she suggested. But even as she spoke, the Zarathra leaped onto the lower part of their formation, causing the entire structure to shudder. "That shouldn't happen," Leary said, skin now flashing with alarm. "Holograms don't have physical mass. Something's wrong with the..." The platform beneath Sisik suddenly shifted, sending the Voran sliding toward the edge overlooking the acid pool. Their exoskeleton scraped against the rock as they struggled to halt their descent. "Help!" Sisik called out, clawed appendages scrabbling for purchase. Without hesitation, Mira lunged forward, grabbing Sisik's upper arm. The Voran's considerable weight pulled against her, enhanced by the simulation's increased gravity. "I can't hold on," Leary warned, trying to help but lacking the physical strength needed. In that critical moment, Mira made a split-second decision. She stopped restraining her natural abilities. Adrenaline flooded her system. Her muscles engaged with their full Earth-adapted strength. Her heart rate doubled, pumping oxygen-rich blood to her straining tissues. With a powerful heave, she pulled Sisik back from the edge, practically lifting the much larger Varan back onto stable ground. The laboratory fell silent. Students and Professor Venn stared in shock at the display of strength that should have been impossible for Mira's frame. The holographic Zarathra flickered and disappeared as someone deactivated the simulation. "Simulation terminated," announced the automated system. "Anomalous physical parameters detected. Safety protocols engaged." Mira stood frozen, aware that she had just revealed capabilities beyond what was supposed to be possible for a being her size. The increased gravity setting should have made her extraordinary strength even more difficult to manifest. "That was..." Sisik began, exoskeleton still clicking with residual fear. "You shouldn't have been able to..." "Is everyone all right?" Professor Venz called out, hurrying toward them as the environmental effects dissipated. "The system registered a malfunction in the physical parameter controls." "We're unharmed," Leary replied, their skin cycling through confused patterns as they looked at Mira. "Thanks to Cadet Hayes." Professor Venz studied Mira with new intensity. "The emergency sensors registered a significant spike in your adrenal output. Cadet, far beyond normal parameters for your species baseline." Mira took a steadying breath. "I reacted instinctively. Professor, the situation appeared dangerous." "Indeed," the professor replied. "But the strength you displayed exceeds our records of Terran capabilities by a considerable margin." "Perhaps your records are incomplete," Mira suggested carefully. Before Professor Venz could respond, Administrator Zor entered the laboratory, accompanied by 2 security officers. "What happened here?" Zor demanded, eyes immediately finding Mira. The central monitoring system flagged a Class 2 biohazard alert. "A simulation malfunction. Administrator." Professor Venz explained. "The environmental controls experienced a calibration error, creating a potentially hazardous situation. Cadet Hayes prevented a possible injury." "Did she?" Zor's tone was skeptical. "And how exactly did a single Terran prevent an accident involving a Voran, who outweighs her by at least 150 kilograms in enhanced gravity conditions?" The laboratory had become utterly silent, all eyes moving between Zor and Mira. "I suggest we continue this discussion in private," Professor Venn said diplomatically. "The students have had enough excitement for one day. Class dismissed. Please review the Zarathra behavioral data available in the academic database for our next session." As the students reluctantly filed out, Mira caught Leary's concerned gaze. The Kethlari's skin displayed a complex pattern she hadn't seen before, something between worry and fascination. "Cadet Hayes, please accompany us to the Administrative Council chamber," Zor instructed, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. The Administrative Council chamber was a formal space, with representatives from various academic departments seated around a semicircular table. Mira stood in the center, feeling uncomfortably like a specimen under examination. Administrator Zor took his position at the center of the table. "We are convened to address a potential security concern regarding Cadet Mira Hayes, Terran exchange student." Professor Venn stood slightly to the side, his position ambiguous, neither fully with the administration nor with Mira. Today's incident has raised questions about the accuracy of the information provided by Earth authorities regarding human physiological capabilities. Zor continued. "Professor Venn, please summarize what occurred." The professor stepped forward. "During a standard simulation exercise, a system malfunction created a potentially dangerous situation. Cadet Hayes displayed physical capabilities exceeding our understood parameters for Terran physiology, preventing injury to another student. And these capabilities," Zor pressed, "how would you characterize them?" Professor Venz hesitated. They were consistent with adaptations seen in species evolved in high-gravity, high-stress environments. Similar, in fact, to the Zarathra we were studying. Murmurs spread through the council members. In other words, Zor said sharply, consistent with a Deathworld predator species? That terminology is politically charged. Administrator, Professor Venn noted, I would prefer to use scientific classifications. Politics aside, the facts remain concerning. Zor turned his attention directly to Mira. Cadet Hayes, do you deny that humans have deliberately understated their physical capabilities in official documentation provided to the Galactic Council? Mira straightened her posture, making a quick decision. Continuing to hide the truth would only reinforce the perception that humans were deceptive and dangerous. Administrator Zor, distinguished council members, she began. Human physiological capabilities have not been misrepresented in our official documentation. However, they have been presented as statistical averages rather than maximum potential outputs. Explain, demanded a Gandorian council member. Humans evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme environmental variations and numerous predatory threats. Mira explained. Under normal circumstances, our bodies operate at an efficient baseline. However, in stress situations, we have evolved emergency response systems that temporarily enhance our physical capabilities. The adrenal response, Professor Venz interjected with academic interest, a fascinating evolutionary adaptation. Many species have stress responses, but the human version appears particularly pronounced. This stress response allows you to suddenly manifest Deathworld predator strength? Zor asked incredulously. It allows us to survive, Mira countered. Just as the Zarathra's adaptations allow it to survive on Krell Prime, evolution doesn't care about galactic politics. Administrator, it responds to environmental pressures. A Zephyrian council member floated forward slightly. Why would Earth authorities not emphasize these capabilities in their petitions for expanded galactic access? Mira met the Zephyrian's gaze steadily. Because every time humans have been honest about our full capabilities, we've been met with fear and containment protocols rather than understanding. The Deathworld classification has been used to justify keeping humanity isolated for generations, despite our technological and cultural achievements. Perhaps with good reason, Zor muttered. I disagree, Professor Venn said unexpectedly. As a xenobiologist, I find this revelation scientifically fascinating rather than alarming. Consider the research opportunities. A sentient species with Deathworld adaptations who can articulate their experiences and collaborate in scientific inquiry. That is precisely why I applied to this academy, Mira added. Not to hide what humans are, but to help bridge the gap in understanding. Yes, we evolved on what you call a death world. Yes, we have adaptations that make us physically resilient by galactic standards, but we're also scholars, artists, explorers, and potential allies. The council chamber fell into thoughtful silence. Even Administrator Zor seemed to be considering her words. There is precedent, Professor Venn noted, for reclassifying species based on new scientific understanding. The Moravian case 70 years ago established that evolutionary adaptations alone do not constitute a security threat. The Moravians don't possess predatory characteristics, Zor countered. Neither do most humans, most of the time, Mira replied. Our emergency adaptations activate only under threat. What you witnessed today was a response to perceived danger to a classmate, not aggression. The debate continued for nearly an hour, with council members raising concerns and Mira addressing them as openly as she could without compromising Earth's strategic interests. Throughout, Professor Venn offered scientific context that gradually shifted the conversation from security fears to academic curiosity. Finally, the council called for a brief recess to deliberate. Mira and Professor Venn waited outside the chamber. That was quite the revelation. Cadet Hayes, the professor said once they were alone. I apologize for the disruption to your class, Professor. On the contrary, Venz replied, compound eyes gleaming with excitement. This is the most interesting development in my teaching career, a living example of Deathworld adaptation in my classroom. The research possibilities are extraordinary. Mira smiled despite her tension. Is that how you see me? As a research subject? I see you as both colleague and fascinating specimen, Venn admitted. Just as you likely see me. Is that not the essence of xenobiology? To study the other while acknowledging their sentience and dignity? Before Mira could respond, the chamber doors reopened, and they were summoned back inside. Administrator Zor appeared considerably less hostile, though still formal. The council has reached a decision regarding Cadet Hayes' status at the academy. Mira braced herself. While concerns regarding the full disclosure of Terran physiological capabilities remain, the council recognizes the scientific and diplomatic value of continued engagement. Cadet Hayes will be permitted to continue her studies with the following provisions. Zor read from a formal document. First, a complete physiological profile will be conducted and added to the xenobiological database, with appropriate security clearances. Second, Cadet Hayes will participate in controlled research studies of human adaptive capabilities, supervised by Professor Venn and the Medical Sciences Division. Third, a formal recommendation will be sent to the Galactic Council suggesting a review of Earth's classification status based on new scientific understanding rather than historical precautionary principles. Mira could hardly believe what she was hearing. This was beyond what she'd hoped to achieve during her entire academic program, accomplished in just 2 days, albeit through an unplanned revelation. Additionally, Zor continued, seeming slightly displeased with this part. Professor Venz has proposed, and the Council has approved, the establishment of a Deathworld exchange initiative to encourage academic and scientific cooperation with adaptable species previously limited by classification restrictions. Professor Venz stepped forward. With Cadet Hayes as our first successful case study, we hope to demonstrate that evolutionary adaptations to extreme environments can enhance scientific understanding rather than pose security concerns. I'm honored, Mira managed, genuinely moved by the unexpected turn of events. Earth will be grateful for this reconsideration. Do not mistake scientific interest for naivety. Cadet Hayes, Zor cautioned. Enhanced monitoring protocols will remain in place, and any aggressive demonstration of your species' capabilities will result in immediate review. Understood, Administrator, Mira replied formally. I came here to learn and to help others learn. That hasn't changed. The following week transformed Mira's academic experience entirely. Word of the Terran Deathworld student spread throughout the academy, turning her from an oddity to a celebrity of sorts. Students who had previously kept their distance now approached with curious questions about Earth and human adaptations. The xenobiology laboratory became a hub of activity as Professor Venz enthusiastically designed new research protocols to document human physiological responses. Mira found herself alternating between regular classes and special research sessions, where her strength, endurance, sensory acuity, and adaptive capabilities were measured under various simulated conditions. Remarkable, Professor Venn declared after Mira completed a stamina test in triple standard gravity. Your metabolic efficiency exceeds even the Zarathra in certain parameters. The ability to maintain cognitive function while under physical stress is particularly notable. On Earth, we call it thinking on your feet, Mira replied, toweling off after the exertion. It's necessary when potential predators are nearby. Yet your species transitioned from prey to apex predators, the professor noted, reviewing the data. A fascinating evolutionary journey. We're still on that journey, Mira said thoughtfully, trying to balance our survival instincts with our aspirations for something more. Even Administrator Zor's attitude had shifted from outright suspicion to cautious scientific interest. He still watched Mira carefully during official functions, but had stopped making thinly veiled threats about containment protocols. Most surprising was the change in her fellow students. Sisik, the Voran she had saved, had become something of an advocate, repeatedly telling the story of her heroic Deathworld strength to anyone who would listen. Leary remained her closest ally, helping to translate the more subtle aspects of various species' reactions to Mira's revealed nature. The Kethlari had even taken to studying Earth's biodiversity with newfound fascination. Your planet produced you, but also thousands of other adaptive strategies, Leary remarked one evening as they studied together. The range of environmental pressures must be extraordinary. We have everything from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, deep oceans to high mountains, Mira confirmed. Life finds a way, as one of our scientists famously observed. And humans can survive in all these environments? With technological assistance in the extremes, but yes, we're generalists by evolution, adaptable rather than specialized. Like the Zarathra, Leary observed, but with greater behavioral plasticity and technological innovation. Mira smiled. I'm not sure how I feel about being constantly compared to a nightmare predator with 3 sets of jaws. Leary's skin flushed with amused patterns. Would you prefer comparison to the Uveni swarm colonies? They're also highly adaptable. I'll stick with the Zarathra, Mira laughed. As the term progressed, the initial sensation surrounding Mira's revelation gradually transformed into a new normal. The Deathworld Exchange Initiative gained momentum, with inquiries coming from other academies about potential human exchange students. Professor Vence had even begun preparations for a reciprocal program that would send selected academy students to Earth under appropriate environmental protections. Consider the scientific value, the professor explained enthusiastically during a planning session. First-hand observation of a Deathworld ecosystem by trained xenobiologists, with proper safety measures, of course. Of course, Mira agreed, imagining the elaborate environmental suits that would be required for species evolved in more forgiving conditions. Even as her academic life flourished, Mira maintained her regular reports back to Earth. What had begun as a mission to gather information on galactic perceptions had evolved into something far more significant, the potential beginning of true integration for humanity into the wider galactic community. Progress exceeding all projections, she reported one evening. Transitioning from containment paradigm to collaborative research framework. Recommend preparation for increased academic exchange opportunities and possible review of Earth's classification status within the year. The response from Earth's diplomatic corps was equally optimistic. The breakthrough at the Academy was already being leveraged in ongoing negotiations with the Galactic Council. On the final day of the term, Professor Vence hosted a special lecture featuring Mira as a co-presenter. The lecture hall was filled beyond capacity, with students from other departments crowding in to hear the presentation titled Deathworld Adaptations: Evolutionary Responses to Extreme Environmental Pressures. As Mira took her place beside the professor at the holotable, she looked out at the diverse array of species watching her with scientific curiosity rather than fear. Leary and Sisik sat in the front row, alongside representatives from the Administrative Council, including a surprisingly attentive Administrator Zor. Today, Professor Venn began, we conclude our study of extreme environment adaptations with a unique opportunity, a first-hand account from a species evolved under what we classify as Deathworld conditions. The holotable illuminated with a three-dimensional representation of Earth, its varied biomes highlighted in different colors. Cadet Hayes will share insights into how humanity's evolutionary path was shaped by Earth's challenging conditions and how these adaptations manifest in their physiology, psychology, and social structures. Mira stepped forward, feeling a momentous sense of responsibility. This wasn't just an academic presentation. It was perhaps the first time a human had been invited to explain their species to the galactic community as a scientific peer rather than a curiosity or potential threat. "Thank you, Professor Venn," she began confidently. "And thank you all for the opportunity to share not just what humanity is, but why we are as we are." The hologram zoomed in on Earth's surface, displaying its diverse and often harsh environments. Humans evolved on a world that challenged us at every turn. Mira continued, "Our gravity is punishing by galactic standards. Our temperature variations can exceed 50 degrees Celsius between seasons in some regions. Our atmosphere contains oxidizers that would be toxic to many species. Our biosphere includes predators that would be classified as extreme threats on most Council worlds." The images shifted to show Earth's prehistory, early humans surviving in harsh conditions. But these challenges forged us rather than defeated us. Like the Zarathra of Krell Prime, we adapted. Unlike the Zarathra, we developed tool use, complex social structures, and eventually, technology that allowed us to modify our environments rather than simply enduring them. For the next hour, Mira detailed human adaptations, from the physical, their endurance, strength-to-weight ratio, and stress response systems, to the cognitive, their problem-solving abilities, risk assessment capabilities, and imaginative threat modeling. Throughout, she drew parallels to other species studied in the course, emphasizing that humans represented one evolutionary solution among many to the challenge of surviving in difficult conditions. What makes humans unique is not that we evolved on a death world, she concluded, but that we developed the capacity to recognize other evolutionary paths as equally valid. We sought the stars not just to escape our challenging world, but to find others who solved the puzzle of existence in different ways. The lecture hall erupted in appreciative sounds from various species, the trill of Zephyrian approval, the resonant hum of Gandorian respect, the chromatic flashing of Kethlari fascination. Professor Venn stepped forward once more. "This presentation exemplifies the core principle of xenobiology, that understanding evolves through interaction, observation, and mutual respect. The Deathworld Exchange Initiative, which will officially launch next term, builds upon this principle." After the presentation, students and faculty alike approached Mira with questions and comments. Even Administrator Zor offered what, for him, constituted high praise. "Your presentation was scientifically rigorous. Cadet Hayes, the Council will be reviewing its recommendations to the Galactic Authority regarding Earth's classification." "Thank you, Administrator," Mira replied formally. "Earth looks forward to increased scientific collaboration." As the crowd finally thinned, Leary approached, their skin displaying the complex patterns of deep thought. "You knew all along, didn't you?" the Kethlari asked quietly. "From the first day, when we discussed the Zarathra, you recognized yourself in the description." Mira nodded slowly. "Not myself specifically, but humanity's evolutionary path. Yes, we've been called monsters by those who don't understand us. I came here partly to change that perception. And you have. Leary's skin shifted to a warm, golden glow of friendship. Though I must admit, knowing I've been roommates with a Deathworld monster all term does explain why you consume that terrifying coffee substance every morning. Mira laughed. Some adaptations are more useful than others. Later that evening, as Mira packed for the brief interterm break, she reflected on how dramatically her mission had evolved. What began as a cautious information-gathering assignment had transformed into the potential beginning of a new era for human-galactic relations. Her personal communication device chimed with an incoming message from Earth Diplomatic Corps. Mission parameters exceeded. Classification review formally initiated by Galactic Council. Prepare for expanded role in exchange initiative development. Congratulations. Cadet Hayes. Your revelation has accomplished in weeks what diplomatic channels have attempted for decades. Sometimes the most effective strategy is simply to be what we are, even when what we are is a Deathworld monster. Mira smiled at the message. Perhaps that was the ultimate lesson of xenobiology, that understanding comes not from hiding one's nature, but from explaining it in terms others can comprehend. Humans might have evolved on a world that the galaxy classified as deadly, but that same crucible had forged qualities the galactic community was finally beginning to value. As she looked out her window at the glittering spires of the Academy under Helios's twin moons, Mira felt a profound sense of possibility. The galaxy had been teaching classes about Deathworld monsters for generations, never realizing that one day, those monsters would be teaching the classes and attending them. The next term would bring new challenges, new species to understand, and new opportunities to demonstrate that humanity's place in the stars need not be limited by their evolutionary origins. And if being classified as a Deathworld species meant occasionally surprising her classmates with displays of strength or endurance, Mira could accept that label with pride. After all, in the vast diversity of galactic life, every adaptation had its purpose, even those forged in the unforgiving conditions of a world called Earth.